Welcome everyone to our second quarter EV intelligence information on the Canadian ZEV market, as well as our EV intelligence database. My name is Paula McGarrigle. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Solas Energy Consulting. I have two distinguished guests with me today that happen to be also part of Solas Energy Consulting. I have Taylor Pawlenchuk, who's a renewable energy analyst here at Solas Energy, and he's joined us recently with a master's degree in engineering. And then we have Gabriel Risbud-Vincent, and he's been with Solas Energy Consulting for a number of years and has really embraced the EV side of things. He's currently working on EV charging infrastructure installation at the moment, which is quite interesting. Solas Energy Consulting has got over 20 years experience. We're over 80 gigawatts, so that's a slightly older presentation. And we are involved in all aspects of the energy transition, including wind, solar, energy storage, EV, and hydrogen. We've consulted on over 500 projects, and we are essentially trusted advisors to our clients. We've had clients for many years. We've been around for 14 years, and we provide services along the full project cycle. I'm really excited to see what's new and different in the EV world, and so I'm going to pass it over to Taylor and Gabe on what's happening for the EV world.
All right, thank you, Paula. So we'll kick off the presentation with looking at the EV market in Canada and how it's been growing over the past couple of years. And then we'll get into government incentives and policies that have been put in place to support this transition to the electric vehicles. And then we'll talk about news in the charging infrastructure segment of this transition. And then we'll get into some of our forecasting that we've been doing in-house. And we'll finish off with looking at this tool that we've developed called EV Intelligence. That's a great tool for helping companies electrify their fleets. And we'll finish off with a Q&A. All right, before we get started, I just want to get some acronyms out of the way. So the important thing to remember is that EV stands for electric vehicle, unless it's preceded by a Z. So if you see ZEV or ZEV, it stands for zero emissions vehicle. And that's sort of the global term for fuel cell electric or battery electric vehicles. Any other time you see EV, it's electric vehicles, so a plug-in hybrid or a fuel cell electric vehicle or a battery electric vehicle, depending on where they get their energy. So let's get into the Canadian market. So in 2022, Canadians registered over 1.5 million new vehicles. And of those vehicles, almost 100,000 were battery electric. We can see that most of these sales and registrations were in Quebec, Ontario, and BC. And it's a pretty staggering growth. Since 2017, you can see that there has been consistent growth, even through the pandemic, with a little bit of a slump there in Q2 of 2020. And especially with SUVs and passenger cars, which are currently the two main classes of vehicles that we see on the road in general, but also that manufacturers have been making for battery electric category. Hybrid vehicles have also seen some growth, not quite as rapid as battery electric. And still the same province is leading the category, but we're seeing that overall in 2022, we have about 20,000 fewer vehicles than battery electric. So battery electric has surpassed the hybrids by a whole percentage point. And even less popular nowadays are plug-in hybrid vehicles, partially perhaps because there are few models available, but also they've sort of been stagnant over the past few years. You can see here that Quebec has quite a large lead over Ontario and BC in this case, but overall still only about 25,000 cars in the last year.
Can I just add a note that the Alberta numbers are not available through Stats Canada, and that's why they're not demonstrated here. So I just wanted to add that as a little note.
Right, it's each province's responsibility to report these stats to Statistics Canada, and Alberta has not done it. And then obviously gas vehicles are still leading sales, but you can see that over the years there is a trend downward. And obviously, because they are the larger provinces, Ontario and Quebec are still leading sales in this category. But over the years, there's been a constant trend downward. All right, and there have been, since the last webinar in February, there have been a few announcements in the private sector. So in Oakville, Ontario, Ford has invested $1.8 billion into their plant. And so they'll be revamping it to be able to manufacture some of their battery electric vehicles, and they'll be assembling battery packs with cells coming from Kentucky. So sort of a binational effort here. And LG Energy Solutions and Stellantis. So Stellantis is the huge auto group that owns Chrysler and Dodge, and European brands such as Fiat and Peugeot and Citroën, I believe. They've invested $5 billion into a Windsor battery facility. So they'll be manufacturing and assembling battery packs in Ontario. And then among a bunch of different announcements for fleets, one notable one was Loblaw, which is perhaps one of the larger grocery conglomerates in Canada. They've purchased 5 hydrogen fuel cell trucks and 5 battery electric trucks. So they'll be testing those out, I believe, in Ontario, and perhaps purchasing more in the future. And the final noteworthy announcement from the private sector is that FedEx has purchased 50 battery electric vans from BrightDrop for its Toronto fleet. And I believe they've also purchased around 400 in California. So BrightDrop is owned by General Motors. And then we have one non-private announcement here. The federal government has issued a call for proposals for zero-emission vehicle infrastructure projects. So they're offering up to $1.5 million per project for research and development. And for demo projects, they're offering up to $5 million. And that's ongoing right now. I think they're going to have some consultation happening in July for that. Since we're already talking about the federal government, let's keep going with how they're supporting electric vehicles in Canada. The federal government has actually set in place some targets. So you can see here with these little maple leaves that they're hoping that zero-emission vehicles should reach 20% of total sales in 2026, 60% in 2030, and 100% by 2035. That's for zero-emission vehicles. So that includes hydrogen fuel cells. And so how are they going to be how are they hoping to achieve these targets? They've put 3 main programs in place. So they have the Zero Emission Vehicles Program, IZEV, the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program. So that means charging infrastructure to support these vehicles. And finally, the medium and heavy duty version of the initial program. So IMHZEV. I'll specify, I guess, what these classes mean. So the line's a little bit blurry. Usually it's based on the weight of the vehicle. But typically a light duty vehicle is more of a passenger vehicle, something you might see on the street every day. This chart here is from the US Department of Energy. And you can see that according to them, in the US, there have been 6.6 million light-duty vehicles sold. So if you see a car on the road, it's probably light-duty. But we've all already seen a lot of these heavy-duty and medium-duty vehicles. And so here are some electric examples. So the Hyundai Ioniq 6 on the top would be a light duty. Then we have the Amazon van developed by Rivian, would be considered medium duty usually. And then on the bottom, we have a Kenworth hydrogen fuel cell semi-truck, would be considered heavy duty. Back to the IZEV program. So right now, the federal government offers $5,000 for battery electric and fuel cell electric vehicles, and also for longer range plug-in hybrids. And for shorter range plug-in hybrids, they offer 2,500, and this is all as long as the MSRP, so the price of the vehicle, is under 55,000 Canadian dollars. And I checked, and for this year, there's over $500 million remaining in funds for this program. And right now, there's also a 100% tax write-off for vehicles that are purchased by companies. So if a business wants to purchase a fleet vehicle, it can currently get a 100% tax write-off. Next year, that's going to drop to 75, and then in 2026, it's going to drop to 55%. All right, and so for the medium and heavy duty portion of this, they grant a lot more money. So right now, they have a list. The Government of Canada has a list of which vehicles are eligible for this grant. But depending on the lease term, depending on the vehicle, you can get up to $200,000 for a new heavy-duty vehicle from the government. All right, and some provinces are offering incentives as well. So maybe the most noteworthy ones are perhaps you could say Quebec would be pretty noteworthy. They have a pretty solid program in place. You can get up to $7,000 for a new electric vehicle, and you can even get half of that for used or an imported vehicle. So even secondhand owners can get an incentive. And a lot of other provinces, so Prince Edward's Island, New Brunswick, Yukon, Northwest Territories, they all offer $5,000 for a new vehicle. So that combined with the federal incentive brings you to $10,000 total. And then we have some other provinces like Newfoundland and Nova Scotia that offer smaller incentives, but Newfoundland offers up to $5,000 for Paula chargers still, and Nova Scotia can even give you a rebate for an e-bike if you'd like. Now, BC has sort of a tiered system now. Depending on your income, you can get between $500 and $4,000 for a new electric vehicle. And while Alberta does not have a program for cars, they do have a program in place for chargers. And Ontario almost had a program, but they got canceled in 2018.
I'm going to be given the part of the presentation talking about how we're going to charge all these EVs, as oftentimes when you talk to people who aren't as familiar with the field, that's one of their main questions. So to start off, I'm going to introduce EVSE, or Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment levels. So there's typically 3 levels that are recognized by industry. Level 1 is what you would find in a typical household outlet. So it's about 110 to 120 volts, 15 amps. It takes the longest to fully charge an electric vehicle, around 16 to 20 hours. But they're universally available, as this is just your typical plug-in you find kind of everywhere. So the next step up would be a level 2. And this is about equivalent to what a dryer outlet would look like. So it's about 208 to 240 volts and 30 amps. And it takes about 4 to 8 hours. And these are the most common. You can see the pricing here where it kind of steps up, with residential being the cheapest up to public being the most expensive. But they tend to be a nice balance between the price point, how long it takes to charge, and the impact on the battery. And the last level is level 3. And these are what are considered DC fast chargers. So these typically take the AC electric supply from the grid, convert it to DC so they can charge the electric vehicle faster. And they are typically around 180 volts and around 100 amps, although you will see a greater variety with the amperage. And they can charge an electric vehicle typically around 30 to 45 minutes, but most manufacturers recommend not charging the last 20% of your battery life using a level 3 charger because it can deteriorate the battery faster. These level 3 chargers are typically more expensive, and therefore you see a lot fewer of these in out in the field. So with that in mind, as of March 1st of this year, there were about 20,000 charging ports at a little under 9,000 charging stations. And the difference between a charging port and a charging station is the ports are the individual places where you would park your vehicle to plug in, and the station is the location you drive to that has multiple ports potentially. And so this growth between December and March of this last year was about a 30% growth. And we have about 16,500 level 2 chargers and a little under 4,000 DC fast chargers or level 3. And just last month, the government of Canada announced over $36 million in funding towards the EV charging ecosystem. And so it's estimated that'll result in about 150 new level 3 chargers or the DC fast chargers and over 3,500 new level 2 chargers. So you can see here is a map showing where you can find these chargers currently in Canada. And you can see there's actually a lot out there, and they're fairly well spread out with a decent amount of level 2 and level 3 across the country. And there's also 5 hydrogen refueling stations as well, although they're a lot harder to spot in this particular map. So another kind of new announcement that has come forward in EV infrastructure recently has been about the North American Charging Standard, or NACS. And historically, this has kind of been known as the Tesla's charger, which kind of like the iPhone charger was unique just to Tesla vehicles. But Tesla announced November 11th, 2022, that they were going to invite network operators and vehicle manufacturers to use their charging connectors and charging ports. And this was an effort to kind of grow electric vehicles and to grow the infrastructure. And you can see in the image above the size comparison of the NACS compared to what a lot of the industry uses, which is the combined charging system, or CCS, with the NACS being significantly smaller and more lightweight than the CCS. And so as I mentioned previously, Tesla published these technical specifications in November of last year. And since then, both Ford and GM have announced that they're adopting Tesla's charging technology. So starting in 2025, this technology, the NACS, will be standard on Ford and GM electric vehicles. And there's a lot of benefits to this. Part of it is because on average, Tesla charging stations tend to be more reliable than CCS stations, as found in a recent study. And because NACS are typically lighter and smaller, they're a lot easier for older or disabled drivers to be able to use. And it's a lot less cumbersome for them to handle. And since this announcement, at least 17 EV charging companies have signaled their support and shared plans that they're going to make these NACS connectors available on their charging stations. So this is kind of a huge announcement because it really shows that growth and the spread of EV technology. And you can see in this chart, this is showing major contributors of EV infrastructure in Canada. And Tesla has most of the level 3 chargers in Canada. And so by opening up its technology to other manufacturers, they're opening up these DC fast chargers or level 3 chargers to a lot more vehicles. And these other chargers can start to use this technology in theirs as well. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, we're going to look at Solas Energy's EV sales forecast. And this is just based on a Fisher-Price adoption curve. And this actually hasn't taken into account the development with the NACS, but just using historic trends, trying to predict what the adoption of EV vehicles will look like by province. And you can see in this chart with Canada's EV sales targets shown with the maple leaf that every province basically is going to exceed the targets for 2026 and 2030, with 2035 being the only one that's not quite met. And that's just because that's the 100% target. But this is very promising to show that naturally there's going to be a lot of growth in the EV sales. And this chart is showing similar to the previous, but showing the registered vehicles that will be on the road, and that by 2035, most of the Canadian fleet will be BEVs. So that's significant growth, especially when you look at what we're sitting at currently, where BEVs make up such a small fraction of the Canadian fleet. So just to highlight what we've talked about so far, so there's been a few incentives and policies prioritizing EV purchasing, and the government is now focusing some of the funding for EV manufacturing, resource development, and infrastructure growth. And there have also been major developments in competition between charging infrastructure that can help facilitate growth and development. And based on current market growth, federal government targets for 2026 and 2030 should be exceeded. And then finally, Canada has a definite plan and a detailed plan to support and grow the EV market. So with that in mind, we're going to move into the last section of this webinar, talking about our EV intelligence database.
Yeah, so EV intelligence, this is a tool we started building around this time last year, when we discovered that there wasn't a lot of information out there about what vehicles were available to Canadian consumers and businesses. A one-stop shop, kind of a really convenient database that's useful in determining which vehicle is best suited for your needs. And it includes a lot of different kinds of vehicles. So it includes light duty, medium duty, and heavy duty. So as I previously said, we include now a lot of medium and heavy duty vehicles. I believe almost half of the database now is medium and heavy duty. There's been a lot of growth in that segment over the last year. But overall, the database includes 275 models. If we count different performance versions of the same vehicle as a different model, which we believe it should be included. We have as much data as possible. And yeah, basically, it's a great way to get an idea of how to decarbonize your fleet. So these are some statistics from the database. They're actually a little bit out of date because we've been updating the database without updating this chart as often. But you can see that the mean range for consumer vehicles is well over 300 kilometers now. Medium and heavy duty, a little lower, but that number has been growing with the addition of more and more fuel cell semi-trucks. And yes, the DC fast charging capability is also steadily increasing, and we've seen that increase over the last year, especially with these new 800 and 900 volt architectures on the batteries. All right, so this is sort of the product you'd be purchasing. So it's a complete access to the database. We also make a PDF that provides some analysis and some insight into the EV industry, and it includes some time with an analyst to look at your different options. So feel free to take a picture of this QR code right now. It'll be shown at the end again. But for now, we can jump into the next section, which is the sibling of the EVI database. We've also built one for construction machinery, and we've been adding more and more models to this one as well. It's also growing quite rapidly, but it includes a lot of different construction and vocational or transportation equipment as well. Basically, electric machining has a lot of different advantages, including lower noise pollution, less maintenance costs, lower fuel costs, obviously. And there have been a lot of investments from different manufacturers and users of construction equipment. And since the last webinar, we've also included EV charging trailers. This is becoming more and more of a thing. So people will have, or companies will have these trailers on site to help charge their EV fleet. And yeah, it's a great way to be able to refuel or recharge your vehicles and your equipment without being close to the grid. So as I might have alluded to, there's a lot of different kinds of equipment included in this database. So we have, everything from track loaders to backhoes to cranes to cement mixers. And we try to include all the data points we can find, all the information we can find on all of these different kinds of equipment, but obviously they're not all apples to apples. So we include everything, but it's you can only compare within one category. You can't necessarily compare an excavator to a cement truck. But at least all the information is there. And if you purchase this, you also purchase some time with an analyst, and we'll be able to guide you through selecting what you need. All right. And as I said before, you get access to the database and also a nice little PDF with some insights into the industry and some time with one of our analysts.
Do reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. So stay in touch, and we'll be identifying when the next Q3 update will be sometime later in August. So stay tuned, watch our website, and we'll absolutely keep you up to date on all of the changes that are going on, which is exciting. So thank you all for coming today. It's been very interesting, the discussion. I love the difficult questions. It keeps us on our toes, and we'll see you next time.